Good Wednesday morning, everybody. My name is Matt Welner with the National Tile Contractors Association. We're gonna start our next stage demo. If you wanna gather in, I'm here with my partner in crime, Mark Heinlein, and this morning we are talking lightweight materials. Now, all week we have been talking about safety within the tile industry. We kicked off the week talking about OSHA and silica regulations. We have talked about engineered control devices. Yesterday, Mark laid out a safety plan for us and a lot of paperwork, right, Mark?
That's right, Matt. I'm into paperwork.
I know you are. I'm not, so that's why I'm down here passing you tools. You like the paperwork. But this is what we're going to do today. One of the things, Mark, that you talked about yesterday was heavy lifting. And so heavy lifting is something that we as tile guys, we're pretty familiar with, right? We got to do a lot of heavy lifting. When you have a bathroom to do, you're probably bringing in 2,000–3,000 pounds easy of material, and that goes for everything from the mud we use for our shower pans, the cement board, the thin set, and then there's the tile. And when we're talking about a master bathroom, sometimes that's on the bottom floor, sometimes it's close to the door, which is always great, but sometimes it's up 2 flights of stairs. And you know, we got to be cautious and take care of our bodies when we're building bathrooms or any tile jobs, really. And so we don't want to end up with looking like one of these hunched over crippled people when we're older, right? And so part of that is taking care of our bodies, and the less stress we can put on our bodies, the better we can be. So we know that there's heavy materials out there, and when I say heavy materials, it might be a 50-pound bag of thin set that we're all familiar with, and we've been mixing that and using that for years, and it's a great product and there's nothing wrong with it. But you know, if I have the opportunity, I sure would like to unload this out of the back of my truck versus the other. So we're taking all of these lightweight materials into consideration today, and so we've simply got an example of a wall and a floor, and one of the things we want to do today is just show how easy this can be, and not taking away anything from some of the older materials, because they're tried and true products, aren't they, Mark?
That's right, Matt. You know, we even have some fiber cement board here that we're using for a floor. Works great, follow the manufacturer instructions. It just weighs a little bit differently than some of the other stuff.
So, Mark, I want you to take that board and we're gonna simply install it on this wall, and while you're making all kinds of noise with that drill, I'm gonna talk about it.
What makes this lighter or lightweight?
So what makes
Matt?
that lighter is this board in particular is it's a foam-based board, and this blue right here in this manufacturer, their waterproofing comes from the core. The blue that you see is the actual waterproofing, and then Mark, show everybody the face. The gray that you see, that is a cementitious coating, and so that gives us a really good bond when we're setting tile. The thin set will grab that cementitious coating. So the blue is the waterproofing, but the gray is our substrate that we're bonding to. So there's a lot of different foam products out there, and they all have their place. And the important thing to remember when talking about different foam board and shower kits is they're not all made equal, they're not all made the same in the raw components that they use. So the foam might be different, the face of it might be different. So let me get you started. I see what you're trying to do there. We always want to have just a little bit of expansion in between not only our boards, but the board to the floor, because everything moves in the tile industry. And we want to allow that movement to take place. So stick one screw in there to get it, hold it, and then I can step away. So what you'll notice that Mark is doing with these particular screws in this manufacturer, they supply a box, and within that box comes an equal amount of both the screws and a washer. So this manufacturer requires that you use a washer, which gives a really good surface area to make sure that the tile, the board with the tile doesn't shear off the wall. And so he's going to keep screwing this off, and when we read the manufacturer's directions for this product, they say that the maximum screw spacing would be 12 inches. So we could go 6, we could go 8, but we never want to spread our screws further than every 12 inches. That's until you get to a ceiling. Then they start to require more screws. So we've talked about that board in particular. Other boards, they're made a little bit different. It's a different type of foam, and the foam is not waterproof. The waterproofing comes from the skin on the outside. It's more of a membrane on the outside. And some of those manufacturers require washers, some of them don't. So, and some of them are going to require a different screw pattern. So if you install a foam product, you can't read one set of instructions from one manufacturer and then just assume that it's all the same. So you have to stop, do the research, and make sure that you are installing per the manufacturer's directions. And Mark, he's always overkill, so he's making sure that he gets plenty of screws in there. And I like how he's trying to do it quietly. That's nice. I appreciate that.
Silently?
Silently. He's over there with my rattle drill, and he's trying to do it nice and quiet. So that looks like a really good job for my daughter. She's 10, and she helps, before I go to work, stick the screws in the washer. Sorry I didn't have her here to do that for you, Mark.
That would have been nice.
It would have been.
Yeah. Sorry I didn't do this before we started this.
That's okay. We can't think of everything, can we?
We try.
So in a second, what Mark's going to do is he's going to treat those screw holes, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that leads to, what about we're only putting up one board? What if you have a whole shower to do or a big wall to do? We've got to also treat those seams, whether it's in a corner or whether we are stacking boards on top of each other. So if in either scenario, before we install the first board maybe on the bottom, before we stack that second board, the manufacturer wants us to put a bead of sealant across that board, and then we're going to take maybe a putty knife or a little tool similar to this that this particular manufacturer gives you with your sealant, and we're going to apply that sealant to the seams and the screw holes. And that's going to make sure that the water can't penetrate through those joints and through those screw holes. So sealant with this manufacturer in both the corners and in the over top of the screws and washers. So that's the important thing to know about that.
How about we take a pause there, Matt?
We can pause. I think everybody understands what you're doing. So Mark, I like how you're doing that and you're working efficiently. He's going to put a little dab of sealant on several of the screw holes. And what I like to do, just a little tip, is I'll start with my seams. I'll strike off my seams first, and then I always end up with a big glob on my putty knife or my tool. And then that big glob is that's what I'm going to put on over top of my screw hole. Save a little bit of money, save a little bit of sealant material so that it doesn't get wasted. So you can strike those off, and what we want to make sure is that when that sealant is finished, we can't see the edge around that. There we go. Just like that. We want to make sure we don't see that silver color of the washer. We want to cover all of that with the sealant. But Mark, one of the things that I like is when we are working with the material like this manufacturer, they give us a whole shower in a box. So I think about lightweight materials, and I think about the way that just a few years ago I was building bathrooms and how many trips I had to take walking up and down the stairs. Phil's over here agreeing with me. He remembers walking up and down those. Doesn't help your knees, does it? You still got them? And you know, a lot of people in the tile industry, they have wore out knees, don't they, Phil? And we think that that's because we're down on our knees all day. And honestly, that's part of it. But I think a bigger part of it is the up and down and the carrying everything, right? And we have a lot of good knee pads out there on the market. Mark's wearing a great pair right there. If I'm going to be down on my knees all day, 8-10 hours, maybe stand up to take a lunch break, that's what I want to make sure I'm taking, you know, good shoes and good knee pads, because I'm either on my feet or I'm on my knees all day long. So I want to take care of both my feet and my knees. So the beauty of this is maybe you have one guy grab one end, somebody else grab the other, and we got one trip into the bathroom. And that kit right there, you bring that into the bathroom and you have all the parts and components right there in the bathroom with you. you can simply, with your curbs and all the different parts that might need to be trimmed up to fit just right, take a handsaw, and a lot of the time you can do it right in the master bathroom, and you have very little cleanup. So again, less trips up and down the stairs or through the house, walking back out to the garage every time you need to cut something. How you feel about that wall, Mark?
Almost done, Matt.
Almost done. Well, we say it's faster. I'm not sure if you're showing everybody that.
Well,
I'm not calling you slow, but they're staring at us now.
I'm old and slow.
But he also said yesterday he's old and slow, but still invincible.
That's right.
And I agree with that 100%.
Guys, I don't think you guys should let Matt talk like that about me.
You shouldn't have given me a microphone then. And you shouldn't let me do this 3 nights a week all over the country.
I deserve it all. Matt, I'm ready for the next step.
You're ready for the next step. Well, I'm going to pass you this uncoupling membrane, and I'm going to let you unpackage this.
Yes, sir.
And I'll help you clear off that board while you get that ready. So different manufacturers make different products, and you see that I'm passing Mark a roll of uncoupling membrane. Anytime I can, this is a personal thing, and this is something that we at the NTCA will always recommend. It's a best practice. And so we get all of our information from a couple places. We get our standards from the ANSI documents, that's the American National Standards Institute. We get our methods from the TCNA handbook, and then we use the manufacturer's instructions, and then we have the reference manual and the NTCA reference manual, and that's where we get a lot of our best practices and our tips and tricks. And one of those things in there, it talks about warranties and things like that. Well, anytime we can, we're gonna use all the products for a shower and keep them under one manufacturer, and then when we do that and we follow their instructions, that's gonna allow us to walk away with a manufacturer warranty. So for our shower, we're gonna install one manufacturer. For our floor, we've got another manufacturer, but we're gonna make sure we're using that uncoupling membrane with their mortars, and then it's all under one roof. We can grout it with their products. And then you know how this works. If you've ever had a problem and you got multiple people involved with that problem, they all start pointing. Well, if I've only got one manufacturer involved, there's nobody else to point to, right? And so, hey, I need your help. And so the reason that they are willing to give you that warranty is because they've done the testing. They've done all of the things that are needed to prove that they make a good product. And so they're not worried about having issues, and they're willing to stand with you. But I'll tell you what, if I ever ran into a problem, whether it was my fault or somebody else's fault, I'm trying to protect my wallet as much as possible. So I want somebody in my corner with me. And that's why we work with a lot of reputable manufacturers. They stand behind us and they stand by our work. So Mark, I see that you dry fit your piece of uncoupling membrane, and we're getting safe here. You got your vest on so we can see you. You got your knee pads on and your glasses. We're gonna take care of our hands at the same time. And then what you're gonna see Mark do next, he's gonna grab a sponge out of that bucket of water, and he's doing two things. We're using this cement board as an example, but if we're doing a plywood substrate or we're doing a concrete substrate, whatever the substrate is, all of these materials that we are building on top of, most of them are really dry substrates. And so if they are a dry substrate, then we want to, one, get the dust off of them. That's part of what he's doing right now. But also, we want to give it a drink of water. And we, all the time, multiple times a week, all of the NTCA trainers, we just say, if it's thirsty, give it a drink. That's how and then we just say it all day in and day out. If it's thirsty, give it a drink. And you can see that water disappear pretty quick. If the surface is still shiny, it's too wet. And so we'll let that soak in, but we're giving that thirsty substrate a drink so that when we apply our thin set over top of this substrate, it doesn't pull in that moisture and take away the moisture that we mixed into our thin set and cause it to dry too fast. So he's given the thirsty substrate a drink. And then all the same practices, if you've ever been to one of our workshops or our regional trainings, we're always giving troweling demos, right? And we're always talking about how to spread mortar. Well, there's really not that much of a difference between installing tile and installing an uncoupling membrane. What you see Mark doing right now is he's taking the flat side of his trowel and he's burning it in. And you hear that noise right now? That's what you want to hear when you're burning something in. Now, Mark, I'm going to borrow that tool for 1 second, and I'm going to show everybody what, when I ask people all the time, burn it in, and they go, okay, I think I understand. And then they just do this motion. And all they're doing is pushing mortar around. They're not really doing anything, right? And so part of burning in the thin set, you're embedding that thin set into your substrate so that you achieve a good bond between in this case, the uncoupling membrane and the substrate. And so Mark's got that burned in, and the next thing he's going to do is just get material on the floor. We're not worried about making it look pretty. So when I explain troweling, I always kind of explain it in 3 steps, actually 4. We're gonna wipe it down, get the dust off, give the thirsty substrate a drink, then we're gonna burn it in, then we're just gonna get enough material to work with. And you have to work just to get it spread around and get an even coat out there. And you're gonna look at it here in the next 30, 40 seconds and go, man, that's pretty ugly. It doesn't look quite right yet. But then once he gets, you see all those swirl marks that he's got going on? We all know as tile professionals, you don't want to set tile over top of swirl marks. It's not going to allow you to get good coverage. So once he has enough material, even with uncoupling membrane, you might think that I'm crazy, that Mark's crazy. We're still going to do straight line troweling. This particular product is a waterproofing product, and so to get the air out from underneath of that membrane, we have to remove the air. And the easiest way to remove the air is to give it a nice straight channel for that air to flow out to each ends. So now that he's got that cleaned or spread and he's got enough material, he's gonna go ahead and do some straight line troweling for us. And part of this has to do with getting good coverage with this uncoupling membrane. There's different types of uncoupling membranes on the market. There's some that are waterproof. There's some that are not waterproof to allow for vapor transmission and to make sure that you can use a modified thin set, and the modified thin set can cure underneath of the uncoupling membrane. And what Mark just held up his trowel and showed you, everybody, is that on the edge of his trowel, before he started doing straight lines, he put a good bead of thin set on the edge of his trowel. If he took and had a nice clean trowel, he would be pulling thin set away. And then he's not gonna have enough thin set. He's gonna be taking thin set away. So he always, stop right there, hold up your trowel. He always has just a little bit right on the edge of his trowel, and if he doesn't, he's gonna be pulling material away, and then he's not gonna have enough thin set. So now that's pretty nice and clean. That looks like a professional job. Very good. Good job, Mark. So again, we're following the manufacturer's instructions. We're gonna let Mark lay that down. But in the manufacturer's instructions, for an uncoupling membrane, there's 2 things that we're looking for and to pay attention to. One is gonna be the size trowel that they recommend. We did that. And then the second thing is the type of thin set, and that has to do with the substrate that you're setting to. And so most uncoupling membranes, they're gonna require, if you're going over wood, it's going to require an ANSI 118.11, which is an EGP, an exterior glue plywood thin set. It means it will stick to exterior glue plywood. And not all thin sets are tested and capable of doing that. So make sure you read the instructions and you're following the directions on which thin set to use. And all of the bags from, I work with a lot of thin set companies, right? A lot of mortar manufacturers. They all do a really good job of labeling their bags with which ANSI standard, or which ANSI, standard is the type of material it is. And so this is a 118.11. And then Mark is simply taking that wood float, and now he's pushing the air out from one end to the other. And one of the things that he's doing is he's using a float that's big enough that if there's an air pocket or he missed a little lump of thin set, he's able to smooth everything out. And so that's really important. We want to make sure that we have a really nice substrate, nice and flat.
Matt, one of the things I did here is I left about a 1/4 of an inch gap between this and the wall.
Yes.
Why did I do that?
So really important, anytime we're doing any tile installation, part of our system, part of our tile assembly, we have to include what is known in the TCNA handbook as EJ 171, and EJ stands for expansion joint. Every tile assembly has movement. Everything not only expands, it contracts, and some of that has to do with we're on top of a wood substrate here. Wood moves, right? Concrete moves, the tile moves. Everything's moving, and so we want to leave that gap, just like Mark pointed out, so that if this floor was to expand, it's not jammed up. We don't ever want that tile to try to push the wall, because guess what? Now it's a competition between which is stronger, that tile that's expanding or the wall that the framer nailed down. And we don't ever want to have that fight, because you get two, if it goes really bad, you could have one of two things happen. That wall gets pushed and we actually push the wall over, or the tile has so much pressure on it that it tents. And both of those are really bad things to have happen, right? And think about it in a shower application. If something expands, you might be stretching that waterproofing. And so if you have enough expansion, you could maybe have an issue with your sealant or your banding or however you've done your waterproofing. So we always want to pay attention, and almost all of the manufacturers always put a little note in there to make sure you're following EJ 171. One of the most critical parts of our tile installation. One of the benefits, let's check that out. Whenever we're installing not only tile but an uncoupling membrane, we're always going to peel back the uncoupling or lift a tile to see what the coverage is. Make sure, now Mark did all of his homework, he read the directions, he read the bag of thin set, he's following all the manufacturer's directions, but we just want to make sure we've got that coverage. So that's what he showed us here just a second ago. Now, Mark is doing something else. He's going to set a tile here in a second. This is a waterproof product, so he's not giving a thirsty substrate a drink anymore. This is a waterproof membrane. It's not thirsty anymore. But he also knows that roll of membrane is hung out in the covering show for about a week now, and it was pretty dusty before you guys got here. And so riding around in the truck or in a tile warehouse, there could be some dust on that membrane. So he's getting the dust off, but he's only using a very, just a damp sponge, not a wet sponge. So Mark, you just set that uncoupling membrane. We can install tile on it right now. We can.
We can.
Right?
We can.
So we don't have to slow down. Now here's the thing to be careful of is if you're not wearing knee pads, you're not distributing the weight, you could end up with some knee prints in that thin set. So if it's a big job, you might want to prep your job on one day, come back the next day, and then set your tile. But if it's a small job, the last job I did was 26 square feet. I could almost stretch and reach the other side. It was a little powder room, right? And so I was able to do exactly what Mark's doing, install my uncoupling membrane and just go straight to work. So saving times with using a product like this. And Mark is making sure he's doing whatever it takes to embed that thin set into that uncoupling membrane, filling the little holes in that, and that's where the bond takes place. This particular manufacturer, they've got kind of a fleece material on the top of this, and so it's not only bonding to the surface and that fleece, it's also going in those holes, and it's locking our thin set in place. Different manufacturers are going to have different shaped. This is a circle here. Others are going to be square. Others are going to be, I don't even know what to call some of the other shapes, right? But that's one of the characteristics, but they're all made to lock that thin set in. So Mark, you use the flat side of your trowel once again. We're keying in that mortar. We're making sure that we get good bond to this substrate. And now you're cleaning up your trowel. We got 2 minutes left, not to put you under pressure.
Tile for me to set, Matt.
I do. You're waiting on me, is
I'm
what
waiting
you're
on
saying.
you, Matt. Just hanging in here.
Okay.
I know
So
you can't keep up with me.
I'm gonna set this up here, and what I want you to do, the same as you were using the flat side of your trowel to key in the mortar to our substrate, making sure we get good bond, we're gonna go and do as much as we possibly can. We're gonna use the back butter buddy, and we are gonna make sure that we back butter this tile. And so easy, again, that stress of holding the tile on your wrist. My first boss, we were doing hotel work. Me and my boss at the time, when I was still a teenager, we were installing 7 showers a day, and it was 12 by 12 tile. And he told me I had to learn to balance that 12 by 12 in my hand and spin it like a pizza. And I did that for about 6 months, buttering tile. And I was a kid, I didn't know any better, and now, guess who has arthritis in this wrist? And guess if you were closer to me, you'd hear my wrist popping right now. So we don't want to do these repetitive motions and all of this. So another tool just to make it easier. Mark's got nice straight lines going in once again, and he's going to drop that tile in just a moment. And we're using, this is called a slant notch trowel here. And so that trowel in particular gives us another advantage to help us collapse those ridges and remove that air. So Mark, he's pushing straight down on it, and then he's gonna shift that left to right just a little bit, and he's collapsing those ridges, but he's gonna make sure that as he pushes to the right, he's not pushing thin set up against the wall, locking everything together. We wanna make sure that we have that EJ 171 that we were talking about, that perimeter movement joint is never filled with thin set or grout. He's checking for coverage. That's pretty good. That's what we want. So 80% in the dry area, 95% in the wet area. That's what we're looking for. I want to thank everybody for their time. Come check us out at booth 7914, directly behind us, almost on the other wall. Again, I'm Matt, and this is Mark with the NTCA. Thanks for hanging out.